If you're not growing some of your own food, it's time to get growing. Our guest today will give you some motivation and some good information. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Colleen, and we are thrilled today to have with us Marjory Wildcraft from the Grow Network. You probably already know her name, but she's the founder of the Grow Network, which is the world's largest online community of people who grow their own food, make medicine, and are becoming free of the collapsing systems.
We always encourage our audience to grow a garden, to grow as much as you can, and to get started now, so that you can make a few mistakes and still learn and grow and get up to speed.
So Marjory, what would you like our audience to know about you?
Well, yeah, I'm just all about homegrown food on every table. It's something I've been doing for decades and I'm passionate about. And now we have a crisis and you need to do it.
Even if it wasn't a crisis, the quality of the food and the taste, you just can't beat it.
Yeah. I know I'm going to use the F word, and that is famine. And people are like, they're lining up a famine. And I'm like, yeah, well, we already have been in a famine for a couple of decades. The existing food supply has nothing in it. There's nothing in it, and it's toxic. So, yeah.
So along that line, take just a minute. Why don't you talk to us about the need for us to produce our own food and reduce our dependence on the system?
Right now is a very, very special time. I think many people are watching and they see that this whole shenanigans going on in Israel and Gaza, and most people recognize that for the false flag it is for setting up World War III. We know that our government is just on this never-ending treadmill of printing so much money. You already see prices of food going up and up and up, and that's that curve that we all see from Weimar, Germany, and we're here now, and it's soon to about start going up like that, where you won't be able to afford food. The third factor is, and most people don't think about this, but the global supply chain is continuing to break down. For example, the Panama Canal only has about 50% of the ships going through. And other ships that are trying to go through the Suez Canal, if anything happens in the Middle East, that's probably going to get pinched off. But we also just have massive trucking companies. Yellow Trucking Company just went bankrupt and 30,000 employees lost their job. I mean, there's all kinds of problems in the system that are breaking down. And I think the way that they like to do this is have one in this region and one in that region and one over there and one over there. And then nobody can really put it all together unless you're really paying attention. And for the most part, if you're not paying attention, it seems, food's going up, but it's kind of nice, right? That's going to come to a real abrupt end here very soon.
You've been doing this for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Before all of this mess, I mean, there's always been little messes, but what drove you to start growing your own food, and what are the driving factors that got you started in this years and years ago?
Yeah, like most people, I had no desire to ever grow my own food. It was like, let somebody else, let the farmers do that. My first career was electrical engineering, and then I saved a bunch of money and I did some classes with Robert Kiyosaki and built a really successful real estate investment business that was so successful. Robert said, hey, why don't you be on my infomercials for Time Life products? And so for 4 years, I was on national television touting rich dad, poor dad, and very successful. I'm happy with starting to have 2 kids. I'm always involved in my community, and I was volunteering on a project that was so innocent. I had no idea this was going to completely upend and change my life. And we were living in Austin, Texas, a kind of a progressive area, right? You'd think, for food. The project was to get locally grown food by the local organic farmers we would start with the first one with a small rural elementary school. And as soon as we got that going, we would replicate it all over Texas. And that project completely failed. And I will never forget the night we were in the Red Rock Community Center on those rickety folding chairs. You know what I mean? And then we were going to put to paper who were going to be the farmers to provide the vegetables. A bunch of us knew all the farmers. We had the president of the Texas Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. We had the president of the Austin Organic Gardening Association. I mean, there were a lot of us that were the people that were in the space. There were not enough local organic farmers in one county to provide part of the vegetables for this small rural elementary school. And Texas has some big counties, right? I couldn't stop shaking. I was the one who was responsible for closing up the building. And I don't, people just disappeared because all of us knew there's only 4 days worth of food supply in the grocery store. And the food travels an average of 1,500 miles. And at that time, I was surrounded by 20 million Texans who were armed to the teeth it was like God just picked me up and just started shaking me for hours. Like I couldn't even get the chairs under the table or turning off the lights. Everything was hard. Neuromuscular was gone. And for months afterward, years actually, I had panic attacks and night sweats. And that night I just said, look, farmers come from gardeners and we all have to learn how to grow food. We have to learn how to grow food. And I will say that it was not an easy journey because in-laws, friends, they were all like, Marjory, girlfriend, you are so crazy. This is the United States of America, man. We're never going to have supply chain problems or empty shelves or, you're just totally worried about, yeah, right. And then, 2008 and now 2020. And, now they're all like, wait a minute. Yeah, this is a thing. So I just said, I know what I know. I know what I've been shown. And I sold the whole real estate business and went on a tirade to learn everything I could about growing food, not only conventionally, like what you do in your backyard or what homesteaders, organic farmers, but I even hung out with barefoot crazies in the national forests who weren't skinny. I mean, how were they doing it? Or time with the Tarahumara Indians out in the Sierra Madres, they've been growing their own food forever, or a whole variety of places, and eventually figured a lot of stuff out. And I realized also in the years that I've had this business that people are not going to come to growing their own food until there's a real crisis. So I said, we have got to design products for people who have no experience. They're older. They're probably out of shape and they need to get food up and growing really, really fast. So of all the different ways that you can produce nutrition and calories, I've selected the absolute easiest one for your average American.
So you believe that it is realistic for the average homeowner to grow enough food in their own backyard to make a difference in feeding themselves. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely correct. At the webinar, I show people how to grow half of their own food in a backyard-sized space. And it really only takes about a half an hour a day. There's a lot of examples. Well, first of all, the Grow Network has tens of thousands of people who have implemented the Grow Half system. But you have tons of other, what is the Darvi's family in LA? They only have a quarter acre and they actually have a CSA. There's lots and lots of examples. Yeah. Will you be doing it when you first start out? No, probably not. But give yourself some time and get better, and you will.
Exactly right. And that's what we're talking about is now is the time to get started so that you can get up and running and learn all that you need to learn. And there's people around to help you, including yourself. It's just so awesome. Yeah. Whatever people can grow makes a huge difference. Every little step helps.
And we'll talk a little bit more about Marjory's program at the end. But right now, I like a couple questions from somebody who really knows. So people who are trying to grow food in their own backyard, what is the one food that you think they are missing that they would benefit most from if they added that?
First thing I recommend to people, and people always think, oh, Marjory, gardening. And I'm going to tell you that animal products are far more productive and efficient than plants. So the first thing that I recommend people start out with is a small flock of laying hens, like 6 laying hens. And you can build a coop and a run and have it in the size less than a parking lot. An average size hen will lay about 250 eggs in a year. If you have 6 of them, that's 1,500 eggs. That means you're going to have 3 egg omelets every day for breakfast, plus 33 dozen eggs left over to gift or trade or barter. So I recommend people start with chickens.
Chickens are my favorite. Yeah, I love my chickens.
And that wasn't what I was expecting because I'm thinking, okay, which plant? But we're not talking about a plant necessarily. We're talking about integrating several resources into the ability to feed ourselves.
And the manure that we get from those chickens helps us to be able to grow our plants better. And it's all this wonderful closed loop that is more self-sustainable. So say I only had a 5 by 10 or a 50 square foot area to be able to grow in. What would you recommend I grow there to take best advantage of that little postage stamp that I have in the back of my condo or something like that?
Okay. So if you're not going to do the chickens, and if you really want to maximize the calories, I would say get a small rabbit tree and a buck and 2 or 3 breeding does, and they will produce, depending on what climate you're in, anywhere from 75 to 90 rabbits a year. So if you think about a rabbit, most people may not be familiar with it. All of your recipes for chicken, you can just substitute rabbit. It's fine. I have often served rabbit to people, forgot to tell them, and they just assumed it was chicken. So extremely interchangeable. The amount of calories and nutrition, the most nutritionally dense food that you can produce in your backyard is going to be the organ meats of the rabbits. That would be their livers and other, the hearts and other things. And just for example, if you have a garden, let's say you have a 100 square foot garden, or you have the laying hens, the 6 laying hens, or you have the small home rabbitry, the garden, depending on what you produce, is going to be anywhere from 30 to 60,000 calories a year, depending on how many seasons you have. The laying hens will be approximately 94,000 calories. Again, it's going to be your breakfast, but rabbits are going to be about 320,000 calories. So I know we're not normally used to thinking in terms of thousands of calories, and the calories been a bad word for most of our lives. But I promise you, when you want to eat good meat, you want meat. You want something with fat. You want something with protein. You can think about your garden. There's no fatty vegetables.
And I'm glad you're talking about calories, because like you said, I always thought calories well, that's a bad thing. But when we're talking about survival, calories are critical. And so it sounds like you're advocating for kind of an integrated, some animals, chickens or rabbits, along with your garden and trees and berries and whatever else you can do to make this complete package of nutrition and calories and everything that we need to stay alive.
Exactly. And as you were talking about earlier, you need those, or Colleen was talking, you need those circles, you need the fertility from the animals to support the plants and the trees. So I even know vegans that raise rabbits and chickens, not to eat the eggs or the meat, but because they want the fertility. They're way better at producing fertility than raising plants and composting them.
And then the ability to barter. If you've got chickens or rabbits, and if you're not going to eat that, the ability to feed others to help your community.
So one of the things I wanted to say about chickens, we have something that sometimes we call it a chicken orchard. We've got this area where we grow a lot of our fruit trees, and the chickens free range in that fenced area. I grow everything organically. I have less bugs. There's significantly less worms in those apple trees. They're constantly fertilizing. I never have to weed because they take care of everything. It's seriously an amazing system. And that's, I think sometimes we need to think more in terms of systems. Next question. Say you have a family of 4. And you are considering starting, and you're trying to decide how much land would you need to produce at least half of what a family of 4 would require as far as food.
I think you could squeeze it into a quarter acre. A half acre would be great. But again, as I said, the Darvius family in Los Angeles, they've got a whole CSA where they're feeding several families and feeding a small neighborhood, and they only have a quarter acre. So do the best you can with what you have. And get started, because here's the thing: we're in so much change right now. I promise you have no idea where you're going to be next year.
One of the things that they had, which really surprised me, I think they're called like the 10th acre farm or something like that, right?
There you go.
They have goats there.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought that was like really surprising on that small amount of space that they were able to do that. But the reason they incorporate those in is for the fertility.
They're going to be importing a lot of feed on that 10th acre to support the goat. Whereas all of my systems, I eventually try to set it up to where you can grow the feed for the livestock and make the fertility for your garden. You're not going to do that from day one. You got too many other things to learn, but that's something you want to have in mind. But again, don't let a lack of land stop you. I mean, even if you have no land, there's this, what is it called? Shared Earth. Is a website where homeowners who have a backyard and they're looking for people who want to grow. I mean, there's all kinds of things to work out. Most farmers I know do not own their own land. They're leasing land from somebody else.
So one of the things that I like, growing the food for my animals, super important to me too, right? When I'm planting stuff, I'm like, is this a good chicken fodder? What can I do to feed my animals? But the other thing I grow a lot of are medicinal herbs. That's really important to me for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I've seen that it's important to you too. So share with us your top 5 medicinal herbs that you would make sure that you grew in your landscape so that you had them.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, most people are a little surprised that I actually don't grow a lot of herbs in my landscape because I like to use wild plants for my medicine. And usually there are so many wild plants around you and they need to be used. They're called weed plants or whatever, and people hate them. But it turns out, wow, that might be just the medicine you need. So, but let me go over my top 5. Number 1, definitely prickly pear. It grows everywhere. It grows here in Puerto Rico. We have people in the community, the TGN network, that are up in Alaska. It grows up there. That was the herb that I used to treat the snake bite when I got bit by a copperhead snake. So we did that at home and never went to the hospital. And I honestly didn't even think about it, but apparently when we were all over, everybody's like, wow, that was amazing. I'm like, really? Okay. Also, most of my plants, I'm going to also give another caveat. I like to have at least 3 different uses for that plant. So that prickly pear, not only is it good food because the pads are edible, the tunas are the fruits that are also edible, and the little flowers are medicinal. They're good, very good for small capillary action and improvement. So another one that I really, really love is comfrey. I love that because, well, first of all, I like to make infusions out of it, which is just deeply, deeply nourishing. Comfrey has a root that goes way down and picks up minerals from deep below, but it's also a wonderful rabbit food and it's a wonderful chicken food, and it grows really, really fast. I like it. Some people say it's invasive. I'm like, there's no such thing as an invasive plant. There's a plant that just loves you. I would say mint is another one, just because my daughter just always seemed to get stomach upsets, and we often had to have mint if we ever went on any car trip. Have a friend over, have a cup of mint tea. Yeah, mint is another huge one that's a big favorite of mine. Epazote has become new on my list right now. I have some rabbits that are having some nose mite problems. I've never seen this before, but living in the tropics, there's like this whole thing. I'm like, what's that? And everybody's like, use ivermectin. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that because that's available. But I think Epazote is going to be the herbal solution to this, and I don't want to be dependent on ivermectin. So Epazote, it's a dewormer for those of you that are worried about worms. And I'd say nettles are another one of my big favorites. I do a lot of nettles infusions. And again, they're one of those plants that just have these roots that go down, and they're really, really deeply nourishing. They have a lot of calcium in it, human bioavailable calcium. And so it's really, really good, especially for those of us that are female, that are getting a little older.
Okay, so what would you say to viewers who are listening to this and just saying, that is too much, that is too big, it's too hard for me, I can't accomplish that?
I'd say start with a couple of herbs on a windowsill. And I don't know how many people have started with herbs on a windowsill, and then now they have gardens and chickens and rabbits. A couple of plants, herbs, and I would recommend something like mint and rosemary and chives. These are all pretty bulletproof, which means they're going to forgive you for your erratic watering schedule and your newbiness. Get as big a pot as you can possibly fit it in that'll stay on the windowsill, because that way it'll have more soil and it'll hold more water, and it'll be more especially forgiving of your erratic water schedule. If you have a little tiny pot, it's going to dry out all the time. You're going to go crazy trying to keep that thing moist. I'm sure one example, my family, you kind of get into your recipe rut, right? And then I started putting fresh herbs on the same recipes, and my family was like, wow, Mom, that's a new thing. I really like it. And no, it's just I was putting fresh basil on the tomato sauce with the spaghetti, right? Or, the rosemary on the pork chop, or, it's just astonishing. Just a little tiny bit of herb. And if you go to the supermarket and buy it, you can get this little tiny package that costs $6. Why don't you go to the nursery and buy the plant for $3? The other great thing about it is everything you're going to learn from those 3 or 4 little plants. So if they don't get enough sunlight, they get kind of pale and tall. They don't get enough water, they kind of turn yellow and then brown and die. If you shoot them up with some kind of synthetic fertilizer, they turn bright yellow and die. All of those things are going to be true for your little plants on the window, to when you have a 50 square foot garden bed, to when you're managing acres of crops, because plants respond pretty much the same way. So you're learning an incredible amount, and just a couple of herbs is very, very powerful.
One of the things that I've loved that we've noticed is, and it doesn't always happen, but a lot of times people start small, and that's what we encourage. Start small with whether it's tomatoes on the back patio or something in a window. Start with something, and somehow the bug catches, and they start getting excited and learning things, and they realize that it's not as hard as they think it might be, and they learn that the food tastes better, and it's just kind of a growing cycle, which I think happens to all of us in a lot of settings, as we start small and it just spirals into wonderful things. So
More and more, yeah. My
yeah,
videographer Anthony was originally from LA and never grew food or anything. Started with a couple of herbs, and man, now he's got gardens and chickens and the whole thing. He's just whole hog. So I've seen it happen to dozens of people now in my personal circle. So
Marjory, thank you so much for joining us today. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit more about what you offer and how you can help them learn to grow more of their own food?
yeah, so I have this free webinar, and as I've said, I've spent almost 2 decades looking at this problem of how can you very quickly get up to speed growing a lot of food when you have no experience, you're older, you're out of shape, and then the rest of us too. There's a very simple 3-component system. I go through that in detail. I show you the calories, I show you the hours, I show you what time it takes, what is the design you're going to need for this chicken coop, why do you want your raised bed to look like this? And we just go in depth in it, and it's about an hour and a half. At the end, there's a Q&A. And then I'll make you an offer for a book and training bundle package. I wrote a book that was published by Penguin Random House, and we'll make you a book and training bundle package, and you will be able to start growing food right away. And it's set up to be able to do this regardless of where you live and what season it is. I've realized that people are going to get started in December, right? So you'll be able to pick one of those different components out and get started. And so, yeah, that's what the webinar is about.
That is so exciting. Thank you so much.
all right, this has been wonderful. And now the question of the day, what are you doing on your own property right now, or what would you like to do or learn how to do that will help you and your family be more self-sustaining and resilient? Share with us. And thanks
Sure.
for being part of the solution.